Hey everyone, it's Clint with the Ivy League Trucker. We're into February now. I am actually in the Southland this week, so it's pretty warm down here. That's a nice change of pace for me. Today's episode will be an interview with a young pastor in the Anglican Church, and she has great empathy with people and the ability to minister to them and serve them. Full disclosure, she's another family member. She's a niece of mine. And Addie is someone, again, who has great integrity about her values, implementing her values in her work, her vocation, which is to be a pastor. Much like Robert, I think you'll find the conversation pretty fascinating. And then in general, I'd like to make a few comments about the show as like anything that's new, it develops and we're getting some feedback now, and I just want to make it clear what the show is really about. I think we're getting more focused on the concepts of empathy and connection and understanding among people who are different and people who have different backgrounds. That's really the core of the show. And I think there's also themes of change and loss and our reactions to that and reinvention, personal reinvention and all those things. I think that's really the core of the show. As you might surmise, it's really not about the Ivy League, nor is it really about trucking. That's just a mashup of my life, which in a very unplanned way has got me to this point. I like the name because it's two very contrasting things. Hopefully, it won't be too confusing for people who might be searching for this type of topic or interest level. But I'm sticking with it because I am the Ivy League trucker and I may be the only one in the United States. I don't know. I think I'm a bit of a purple unicorn there. So that's what the show's about. And I'd love to get feedback from folks to ivyleaguetrucker@gmail.com as to what you're liking about the show, what you're not liking about it, the types of people you might like to hear from, etc. Clearly, it's in the early days here. The acquaintances and relationships I've gotten in my entire life that I'm still connected with are the folks that I'm reaching out to. At some point, we'll probably be reaching out beyond that, but I think there's a lot of that in my relational wheelhouse to bring to the table for the immediate future. So that's what I intend to do. Also, I'll have some more musings about this topic of connection, etc., as we go along. Another thing, which is a great irony about the show, is I, personality wise, am a fairly not introspective, but I think I started out as more introspective and have become more extroverted as I've grown. But also, I'm someone who has what they call low attachment. At least a counselor said that to me once, meaning emotionally, I don't really strongly attach to folks, maybe as much as others do. And that's presented some challenges for me in my life, and I now understand that. So I think it's kind of ironic. I have great curiosity and heart for folks, but I also am someone who is comfortable being alone as well. So I guess the trucking thing kind of works that way too. But this podcast is really an effort for me personally from the heart to try to stay connected with people and connected with the broader world. So hopefully you'll find that of value. Thanks for that, listening to that as I just kind of work this out and think it through as to what the podcast should be all about. Of all the episodes to date, which is only 6, the best feedback we've gotten us on the interview with Robert. So I think I'm going to try to take things in that direction a little bit, at least in the near term. So buckle up. We've got a great interview with Addie. Hey, everybody. Today we're here with Addie, and Addie is a Anglican pastor, and she's a young mother. And full disclosure, she is my niece, and so she's Robert's cousin. And she's also somebody who I think, based on just her general makeup, her work as a pastor, and her intellectual curiosity, is a great person for the podcast. So, Addie, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. So I'm driving right now. What are you doing?
I am hanging out in my room. We just finished up bedtime with my kids and just hanging out.
Cool. So you're married. How many children?
I have 2 little boys. They're 1 and 3.
Oh, so you guys got your hands full.
Yes, we really, really do. Two pretty demanding careers and two very demanding little boys between my husband and I.
So tell us a little bit about just kind of your life arc, like how you grew up, education, how you got into what you're doing today.
Sure. So I grew up in a Christian family, and that had always been part of my life. I actually went to a Christian college, which is where I met my husband, kind of a cliche in that world, but worked out pretty well. We got married when I was 21. And a couple years after we got married, we moved to Hawaii, which is where my husband
Wow.
is from.
Okay.
Yes, I know. I know. Please don't feel too sorry for me.
I don't.
Um, so a couple years into our marriage, when we were in our mid-20s, we moved to Hawaii, which is where he's from. And while we were out there, we joined a small Anglican church plant. And it was through that church plant that I first sort of became curious about what it might look like to go into ministry. Kind of went through a what we call a discernment process and started seminary, which is grad school for pastors in 2020. So I was in seminary mostly online throughout the pandemic while working part time and helping plant a church. And then I graduated with my Master of Divinity in 2023. We moved back to the East Coast. I had one baby while I was in seminary and one right after. And then shortly after our second child was born, I started a job at the church where I still work. So that was about a year ago.
Wow. So, like I say about all the women in my life, they do all this stuff while making humans at the same time. Pretty impressive. For those people who are not Christians or not churched like Addie and I are, can you explain like what's an Anglican church? Is that a specific like what are the things that make an Anglican church versus like a Baptist church or a Catholic church? Can you frame it in for
Mhm.
us a little bit?
Sure. So an Anglican church is a Protestant church. It's not Catholic or Orthodox, but it would to someone who is familiar with the Catholic tradition feel kind of familiar. We do have a lot of liturgy. We wear some of the vestments, they're called, the things that Catholic priests wear.
Okay.
But in terms of theology, it's much more similar to a Protestant church, a product of the Reformation. But a lot of the liturgy and traditions would look a little bit more like those liturgical churches. So we have bishops who oversee regions called dioceses, and within those regions, we have two different kinds of pastors, priests, and deacons. I know all of that. I don't know how helpful that language would be to your audience, but the Anglican Church is also worldwide. So
Okay.
I'm part of an Anglican church here in America, but there are Anglican churches around the globe that we are in fellowship with, that we meet with on a regular basis.
Okay. Okay. What was it in your life that, the transition from, post college, the transition from like civilian life to being a pastor? Like what was on your heart and mind that kind of led you into that direction?
Oh man, I don't know how weird this is going to be for your audience, but it was sort of a set of encounters with people who called out for me things that they could see in me that I had not yet seen in myself.
Okay, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I think part of it for me was that some Christian churches don't call women into positions of leadership. So some of the things that I maybe hadn't seen in myself were a product of that. It wasn't really on my radar that some of those gifts would be things that I could utilize in a life in ministry. Part of it was just I don't know that I was paying attention. So when we joined this church plant, there had been sort of a series of conversations that I'd had with the pastor of that church where he was affirming some gifts in me and encouraging me that I should think about, pray about, talk to people about what it might look like for me to go into ministry. And I was really not interested. It
No.
was
Oh, okay.
not on my life trajectory, not a thing that I had ever really considered for myself. And along the way, while I was kind of ignoring that voice, a couple other people started to call out the same things. And so I went into sort of a process of asking people from different walks of my life questions, sharing with them the stories that I've been hearing. That included some members of my family, some professors from my college, some friends from different churches I'd attended, and they all unanimously said, "We hear this story. We agree with you that we think this is a thing that God is calling you into. We think that you should go to seminary." That was in like January of 2020. And we had just moved to Hawaii a few months ago. So our lives weren't super stable yet. So my husband and I talked about it and decided that it didn't really make sense for me to pursue that right now, that we would, give it a few years, get our feet under us financially. And then 2 months later, a global pandemic hit and I lost my job. And that someday became right now because I was just stuck at home during a pandemic. So it was a good time for me to start looking into it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, the pandemic was a big kind of wedge in everybody's life, I think. That there's the
Hmm.
before times and the after times and the weird during times. So tell us about a typical day in the life of an Anglican pastor. The church you're in is a fairly sizable church, right?
Yeah, we have about 850 people on a Sunday. So it's a large church with a
Okay.
large pastoral team.
Okay. And when you say large pastoral team, like how many folks?
I'm one of 5 full-time priests on staff.
Okay. So just kind of give us a typical day in the life for you. Like what are the things that you're doing? Just kind of walk us through that.
Sure. So it's actually kind of a hard question to answer because it really depends on what's on the day and on what's going on that time of year. So I'm sure you can imagine during Christmas and Easter, those are very busy seasons that are focused around a lot of, public services. But a typical week on Sunday, I'm at church pretty much all day. We have 3 services, so that takes up most of my day. We have Tuesdays and Wednesdays, a lot of meetings with people on staff where we're either planning worship or talking about needs in our congregation. I'll meet with my supervisor to talk about the things that I have going on. The rest of the week, it depends on the needs of our congregation. So I'll do hospital visits. I'll pray with people who are struggling with something and kind of give them a listening ear and provide counsel. Some weeks I might be writing a sermon if I'm preaching that week. I'm currently running a small group called Christianity Explored. So preparing for that and equipping my volunteers takes up a lot of my time.
Is that something
This
for people who are kind of like curious about Christianity?
Yeah, it's for people who either aren't Christians and are curious, or maybe who are new to the faith, or, maybe people who've walked away from the church for a while for a variety of reasons who are interested in coming back. So it's sort of a small group for people who don't like small groups. Um,
Okay.
so it involves teaching and asking questions, and we're studying the Gospel of Mark.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much of your time is spent in what in the Christian world we call pastoral cases, which is basically counseling people who have some type
Hmm.
of presenting need or struggle or thing they're dealing with? Do you do that individually with people?
I do. That's probably about maybe a third of my time is meeting with people individually to counsel them or pray with them.
Okay. The theme of the podcast is this idea of
Mhm.
connecting with other people who are different than us. Also, so there's 2 sides of that, right? There's the tactics and techniques and skills of connecting with people. That's one thing. Then there's the other just aspect of being curious about people who are different than us, but maybe, either we don't have access to them or we struggle in making a connection with them when we're with them. Is that something you've struggled with in your life, connecting with other people who are really different, or is that something you don't struggle with?
That's actually one of my favorite things that I get to do as part of my job.
Okay.
Um, yeah, which is it's funny because I didn't think that that would be very much a part of it when I was in seminary and kind of going through the ordination process. Your typical person who comes to an Anglican church is Anglican, right? So
Right.
there's sort of a baseline level of commonality. Not only are they most likely a Christian, but they have chosen to be at a church that worships in a certain way. So there's sort of a baseline level of commonality. And I didn't really think that I would encounter much what Christians would call evangelism, which is sort of sharing what Christianity is with someone who isn't a Christian. I didn't really think that would be much part of my job.
Mhm.
But I found that it actually is far more than I expected. So, for example, last fall at my church, I ran a small group called Alpha, which is similar to Christianity Explored. but it's a place for people to come and ask hard questions. So each week we would gather and ask a question like, why do bad things happen to good people? Or why should I read the Bible? Or what is prayer? Questions like that. And the purpose of it and what I really tried to instill in my volunteers was that there aren't any wrong answers, that it was a place for people who had big, hard questions to come and ask big, hard questions and not be told, this is the thing that you ought to believe. I was not expecting this, but there were a number of people who came who weren't Christians, who came because, maybe they had encountered Christians before and they had questions, or maybe they were dating someone who went to our church and they wanted to learn a little bit more. And so there ended up being a lot of those people who believed and thought things that were very different from me, and I loved it. It was it still is, like, the most fun thing that I get to do every week is to gather with those people and ask these hard questions and create an environment where people feel free to share what they think and what they believe, even if it's a little bit, different from what everyone else in the room
Uh,
believes, and have sort of a culture of acceptance.
I think that's really cool, and it's interesting. I think looking from the outside in, I would think a lot of people who aren't Christians would think, well, everybody within the four walls of that church believe a certain way and a certain thing.
Mm,
And you're telling us that's a little too simplistic. Can you drill down on that? Like, take your back self back to running these conversations. How do you create, like, what kind of ways of talking and ways of connecting with people do you intentionally do in those conversations so that people feel safe to ask a hard question or an embarrassing question or something that may reveal that they just don't know this?
okay, well, I would have a volunteer training. We typically would have maybe 30 people come to these conversations. We provide them with a free meal. There's a very hospitable environment. There's probably 45 minutes of just hanging out, chatting, eating before we start. That
Mhm.
helps people get comfortable. But I would also have, maybe 12 volunteers who would come to help lead these conversations. And some of the things that I would train them on would be not to use Christian coded language. It can be really alienating and isolating for people if you start talking and using, euphemisms or idioms that only other Christians would understand. So we talked a lot about how to avoid using that kind of language that would make people feel left out, and how to avoid assuming that people knew what we were talking about.
Mhm.
There was also a lot of training on encouraging people to share what they thought and to never disagree or say that they were wrong. Of
Mm.
course, there was a level of, if someone asks you how many books are in the Bible, you can say 66, but to just, like, really encourage people to accept all points of view as equally valid and let people share what they thought and ask follow-up questions. And I said it from the front multiple times, "I'm gonna say a couple of things, and here's a piece of paper, write some notes, write down what you like that I say, what you don't like what I say. Anything goes. Please share with your group openly." But I think that what really created that environment was the relationships people had. This, like, 45 minutes of chatting over dinner and talking and getting to know one another and building up camaraderie and trust before we dove into those conversations about harder topics.
Yeah, I think that's pretty insightful too. And often you'll get into conversation with people without having the benefit or not done that sort of thing. It's kind of like you build relational capital in doing the simple things, just hanging out,
Mhm.
talking, small talk. I think
Yeah,
Robert talked, small talk has it's a way in to ask a
totally.
person about themselves and draw them out. And then when you move to something that's could be a little bit more emotionally fraught or
Mhm.
weighty or whatever, it's just easier because the person in front of you is not a total stranger.
Totally, totally. And to just say upfront, "I'm not gonna ask you to change your mind."
Mm,
Like, I will probably at some point share my point of view, but I'm not asking you to have the same point of view as me. You can disagree with me, and I'm not gonna ask you to change. And I do think that that posture of not asking people to change their minds is what opens people up to be able to change their minds, whether it's on a religious topic or a political topic. As soon as someone is trying to convince you to change your point of view, you're going to get defensive and you're not going
mhm.
to really open yourself up to what the other person might be saying.
Yeah, it's kind of maybe broadly the definition between a dialogue, a conversation versus
Mhm.
an argument or a polemic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and people just get their backs up when
Mhm.
they're being pushed,
Yeah.
and which is that would it happens within your marriage. If you start a conversation with your wife or husband or spouse or significant other or partner and say, "Why do you always do this?" Well, they're instantly gonna be defensive,
I don't
and
always do that. What are you talking about?
right,
Yeah.
right, as opposed to, "Could you tell me about that?"
Mhm.
Just leaving it open. So, okay, interesting, very interesting. Now let's go more broadly to society. We'll get outside the four walls of the church
Mhm.
into your broader personal life. Do you tend to kinda hang out with people who are kinda like you, or are you in a very diverse mix of people in your personal life?
I think it would depend on your definitions. I think
Okay,
most people are drawn to others who have, similar socioeconomic status and educational achievement. I think that's true of most people.
mhm,
It's probably broadly true of me as well. I would say that I have a number of family members or friends who hold pretty different theology or political perspectives from me,
okay,
but I also am sure that someone looking in from the outside would say, "Well, most of your friends are Christians and most of them went to college." So I think it sort of depends on your definition and how broadly you define different.
okay, okay. Well, let's go to those relationships in the family who how do you broker those? Like, how do you know when to enter in or not enter in? Like, give us a sense of how you live your life with folks who, disagree on politics or disagree on some maybe what outsiders of you as that finer theological points, but within our family, they're fairly you at least may perceive them as being more significant. How do you play that game? How do you do that?
I wish I could say I did it well. It is challenging, especially in the theology differences because they're so significant for who I am and what I love.
Okay.
Um, I was brought up in churches that didn't ordain women, and so a lot of the people that I love in my family or from my childhood don't understand or maybe take issue with me being in the position that I'm in my church.
Mhm.
And that's hard for me for sure. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that some of those people would say that I don't handle it very well at the time. I think ultimately what's been helpful for me is to just remind myself that when it comes to my vocation as an Anglican priest, what matters is God's opinion of me, my church's need of me, and the fact that my husband is supportive. If any of those three things change, I would stop doing what I was doing.
Okay.
But ultimately, I don't need everyone that I love to affirm my vocation. If they feel the need to disagree with me, that's fine. Everyone's allowed to have their own theological convictions. It's not my job to change their mind. And I've actually sort of come to the place of deciding that I'm not going to discuss it with members of my family because it causes conflict. There are other people who they can ask how I got to my conclusions or where that theology comes from, and that's totally fine. But I have found that it just causes conflict and it's not really worth me brokering with my family members.
Gotcha. So, I guess the backstory of what I'm hearing is you this is very passionate for you. It's a core part of your identity, but you also have and I can just comment being in the family, you really care about your family members and love them.
Yeah.
So, there's this tension, and you've kind of landed in a certain place of how you're dealing with it. And is this getting easier for you as you go along, or is it still always gonna kinda be out there?
It is getting easier. I think that when it comes to a lot of people's large differences, I think that when it comes to a lot of people's big ideological differences, whether it be about religion or politics or ethics or anything, that when you enter into discussion with somebody that you love and believes something different than you, and you want to change their mind, and you're thinking, man, if I could just explain to them how I got to this conclusion, they'd have to agree with me. That's almost never going to happen. And it's similar to how I think about evangelism. I think that very rarely is someone argued into a saving faith in Jesus. That almost
Mhm.
never happens. What I have seen happen is that people are loved into a saving faith with Jesus. That you love someone, you care for them, you say to them, like, I'm not going to change your mind, but I care about you and I just want to be friends with you. And then along the way, I've seen this happen. Someone will realize, oh, they're loving me the way that God loves me. And I want to know that more. I think the same thing is true of any ideological difference. that it's not helpful for me to try to go to bat with a member of my family about my ideological differences. What is helpful is for me to just live fully and honestly with integrity into the things that I think God is calling me to do. And if in witnessing that, they come to the same conclusions as me, awesome. And if they don't, it's not actually my job to change anybody's mind.
Well said. Yeah, Robert said some things along similar lines, and I think the valuing of a relationship first, and kind of going from that place, and also and moving in a charitable and loving way, even though it's like, hey, we don't agree about this, and it's fairly significant. I think is a good stance and posture for everyone. But I would say for you, you like Robert have a lot of integrity in this is what I believe and care about, and this is what I'm doing with my life. Which
Hmm.
I think for your this is my judgment, I guess. Your generation, a lot of people struggle with that, right? It's like, who am I? What do I want to do? Or whatever. And a lot of it is just maybe age and maturity, but I see a strong just integrity of that. And that's a beautiful thing to see,
Thank you.
especially being older and looking at the next generation. You guys are the future. And, we're just the old farts. So,
Thank you. I do I do think that part of this for me is that it happened to me. Like I
mm,
was able to change my perspectives on a lot of things when I went to college and met people who thought differently than me and still wanted to be friends with me. I think that if anyone had ever sat me down and said, "You need to change your perspectives on X, Y, and Z," I would have gotten defensive the way that everybody gets defensive. But it
mhm.
happens to me too. I think it happens to, I mean, I think most people who change their minds, that's how it happens.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, I would agree too. It's my mother used to say, "You gotta earn the right to be heard," right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
the earning the right is mostly relational, right? Like,
Hmm.
I care about you. You want a friend? Be a friend. You want somebody to counsel you? To show that you're willing to listen to counsel, sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
let's switch gears a little bit. So, if you were, we're living in this very divided time. Politics
Hmm.
is wild right now and very
Hmm.
oppositional and very divided. From where I sit at my age, I look back at the world, the political world in America when I was your age, early 30s, and it was just much different. There was a lot more middle,
Hmm.
and there was strong differences between right and left and different ideologies, but it wasn't just so heated and
Hmm.
oppositional. What, as a young citizen of America, what would you do to try to heal that? Like, what would you say to people if they were willing to listen, or what would you do to try to help that out?
Yeah. I also see this a lot in my work. We are, our church is outside of DC.
Okay.
So you can imagine that there are people who are not just really passionate about politics, but whose livelihoods are involved with politics at our church on both sides of the aisle. And what I really appreciate about our leadership is that they try really hard to address the things going on in our world in a way that doesn't take a side other than like what is biblical. So not to endorse one politician or to take a partisan side, but to say, we are called, like, these are the things that we are called to do as Christians.
Okay.
And I think that that for me has found a lot of unity, that there's a baseline level of things that most people care about. I think about this a lot with people I love who have very different politics than me, is that ultimately we have very similar goals. We want to see less people in poverty, for example. Now, how we would consider going about that might be wildly different. But when we realize that actually most people want less war and more joy, and most
Yeah.
people want,
Yeah.
like, we don't want to see people fighting and violence in the streets. And no one, and like the way that the politicians talk about one another, no one wants that. We're just disagreeing about how to go about it. And when we stop vilifying one another and realize that your average American wants good things and our disagreements are how to go about achieving those good things, that really humanizes your opposition and
Hmm.
helps you to realize that we are all people who are all trying to make the best decisions that we can in a really difficult set of circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's a good word. It's I was listening to another podcast along those lines, which I would recommend called Braver Heart, that
Mhm,
was produced only 6 episodes with Monica Guzman around this specific thing, like the lead up, the election, and the post. And it brought people
mhm,
from the right and the left together. And one of the things they said was, hey, we could disagree about policies, but when we demonize each other as people
mhm.
because of what we even may believe or we think the other person believes or whatever, then that's when it gets ugly.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
and I
it
also
was
think oh,
wanting
sorry.
no, no, go ahead. I mean, it was wanting to step back from that
Mhm,
and say, "Hey, we're 2 human beings, we're 2 Americans. We want these good things. We just disagree about how to get there. Can we talk about that?" As opposed
mhm,
to, "Because you support X, you must be like that."
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that the most ridiculous and most divisive voices are the loudest, the people who are crying for the worst things, this like,
Mhm.
the most extreme version of the right and the most extreme version of the left, those voices are the loudest, and so then it's easy for someone who's, say, center right to look at the extreme left and say, "All liberals think that," and the person on the center left to look at the extreme right and think all conservatives think that, and I think that that's
Right.
just the loudest voices, not your average person.
So you grew up you're the same age profile as my kids, they were your
Mhm,
cousins growing up. And I think folks in your age group were just missed, like, being totally immersed in social media in their childhood. Like,
mhm,
you lived life before everything was on the phone
mhm.
through the tender ages of, like, say, 9 to 14.
Yeah.
You were not being bombarded by a smartphone with ridiculous female body image stuff. For one small example, which is significant,
Mhm.
right? Whereas if
Right.
you were born in pretty much the year 2000 or like 99 or 2000 or later, the smartphone comes in 2012 and in 2000 or 2007 and 2012 is the forward
Mhm.
facing camera. And then it just really goes south as far as mental health and all that stuff.
Yeah.
What's your sense of the whole kinda like everything's on the internet, everything's on the phone? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is when it comes to this our general theme of relationships?
Oh, I don't think it's a good thing.
So how so?
I I will say that I am on social media. I use social media. I use the phone. My in-laws are in Hawaii. A lot of my friends are spread out around the country.
Sure,
There
yeah.
is some utility to social media. We were in the same family Facebook group where we can keep in touch with long distance
Mhm.
cousins. There is definitely a utility, but I think there also is the creation of this like fake persona where you can look at people's lives and it can look as though everything is a certain way that it isn't. I think that's really dangerous and can lead to a lot of discontent. I think that with the dawn of AI, it's gotten a lot worse.
Yeah,
And
kinda
I,
scary.
yeah, and I have compared the two things when talking to people, closer to your generation
Mhm.
who might say, "Well, this is just the latest innovation. It's like the smartphone, it's like social media, it's like the internet." And I think it's a whole new level similar to social media where I think it's making it's harming our society.
So how's AI harming our society? Like, give me an example.
I am very fearful when I look out at the world and the things going on that it is becoming harder and harder to trust the evidence of our eyes and ears.
Okay.
I also think a whole host of issues. And again, it has some utility the way that social media has some utility. But I think that when we look out at the world and we look at some of the things that are happening on the news, I'm becoming increasingly concerned that I'm not able to trust the things that I see on the internet. I mean, you could never really trust everything you saw on the internet, but I think that it's getting worse. And I have a lot of concerns about the ways that it can be used to harm people.
Mhm.
I think that it's sort of compounding a lot of the issues that social media created.
Yeah, interesting. I would agree in general. Like you just, you're in Reels or TikTok or whatever, and then
Hmm.
you're looking at something, you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's AI. That was
Hmm.
someone with a marketing or political point of view, and the entire thing is AI. Like the guy looks like he's talking, but as though he's AI, and it's just
Oh, yeah.
getting scarily ability to trick us better by the minute, and it's just kind of crazy. Uh,
Yeah. And it's taking away from our ability to to think well and just discern things. And I mean, AI is not a person.
So, so Addie, tell me a little bit about your relationship with your siblings.
Sure. So we are very close. My parents managed to have 4 kids in less than 3 years. So we
Wowzers!
all, yeah, yeah. As a parent now, I am baffled by how they managed that.
And
But we were all,
you're a twin, right?
yes, I'm a twin, and then they had 2 more in rapid succession. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, we're very close in age, which I don't know if that contributes, but we're very close now as well. So I have a sister, my twin sister, and she lives less than a mile from me. We have kids that are about the same age. We see each other quite a bit. And 2 brothers, one who lives locally and one who lives a little bit further away, but we're still pretty close, actually. Talked to him on the phone for a while today. So we're very close. And I think I credit my parents a lot for that. They worked at making sure that we had a lot of time together and really invested in our relationships with them and with each other.
Okay. And how has your relationship changed with your siblings? Like from, I mean, there's childhood, and then there's now you're all young adults, and you and your sister are married. Your brothers are not. So how's that changed? Is it gotten easier, harder, or anything to say about that?
Yeah, I think that it got hard for a minute when we were transitioning from being kind of teenagers living in my parents' home into young adulthood. That transition was challenging, as I think all seasons of transition are. We all were kind of working at establishing who we were and what we believed and what we thought. And I think most young adults go through a period of looking at the things that they were taught and raised in and deciding what they loved and wanted to bring into adulthood with them and what they didn't. And so, as all 4 of us were navigating that at the same time, there definitely was some conflict. But we all are very close now, despite our differences. We all really value a lot of the same things. And I think that what helps in the places that we're different is that we really respect one another and
Mhm.
understand how each other came to our different conclusions. And so that's really helpful as we're engaging on the ways that we're different.
Okay. Yeah, I would, as your uncle, I would report that that's true. It's interesting across other I look across broadly across like my peers' children,
Hmm.
and I see it's kind of all over the map, right? Some of
Yeah.
them, the kids barely they don't really have much of a relationship. They live in different places. And that to me is kind of sad, right? It's like
Hmm. Yeah.
you want familiar relationships to stay strong. And I can report that you and your siblings, ideologically and politically are not all the same, but
Hmm.
it's good to hear that you're able to, maintain those personal relationships across that, especially in an era now where, a lot of people are having a hard time with
Yeah.
family relationships across ideologies and politics. So
Yeah.
I think it takes work to maintain. You got anything to say about that? Or maybe you already just said it.
Yeah. I mean, I became aware as a young adult how fortunate I was in that. It wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I realized that some people didn't talk to their parents as often as I did. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, and I really do credit my parents a lot with the ways that we've stayed close. I think even in my parents' generation, my mom and her siblings, as you know, as you're married to one of them, have a lot of
Mhm.
differences and
They
still
they
really
do.
they do, and they still really value being together and spending time together, and they really value tradition, and they're also able to flex when traditions don't meet the needs of what's happening in that generation at that time, and so I think they
Mhm.
hold it really well, which is helpful. My parents also are just sort of the center of the wheel for us in a lot of ways, like, all of our relationships are we're all really close to my parents,
Okay.
and so if they're, like, sort of the center and we're the spokes, that kind of c pulls us together that we're all really close to my parents still, so the 3 of us that are local gather pretty often, and my brother who lives further away comes when he can, and so we see a lot of each other, and
Mhm.
I think that's really helpful as well, having that model and that center of my parents who've worked really, really hard to maintain good relationships and shift as our lives have shifted.
Yeah, your mom and dad are good at that. They have very strong long-term relationships with the
Mhm,
people, in the DC area where they live and
mhm.
who are, who are not family, but I've gotten to know them over the years because they're almost like family. And
Yeah.
I was at your mom's. we were all at your mom's 60th. Was that last year or the year before? And
Yeah, last
it
year.
was really great to see those people be there and look across at them. And then also at your wedding and your sister's wedding, these people just show up, you know.
Yeah.
They show up at the family gathering place that we have in Pennsylvania. I know they're in your life, and that's just a testament to your parents, one, ability to maintain relationships over time and valuing that and modeling that for you. And I know a lot
Mhm.
of people, they don't have that, right? Their parents, for whatever reason, don't have a lot of strong relationships, or if they do have good family relationships, they're really far away and they don't see much of them.
Mhm.
So I think you guys have gotten a little kind of the best of both worlds on the
Yeah.
family piece and the friends piece,
Yeah.
and seeing your parents maintain these relationships over time. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And I will
yeah.
say also that my they really encouraged us to think for ourselves and come to our own conclusions. So I and one of my siblings have landed in very different places, both
Mhm.
politically, theologically, just ideologically in general.
Yeah.
And my mom likes to kind of brag on that. That we've both of us have ended up in different places than they are. My mom likes to say that she enabled that. I don't know whether
I
she's taking too much
yeah.
credit, but I think that, like,
I
there
think
was
she
sort of a
I
space
think
for
she
us to
does
ask
yeah,
questions.
yes, I think, space to ask questions and space to be respected. I think on another like, my mother always used to say, "You gotta earn the right to be heard," right?
Yeah.
And I think that's going on, but also I know among your peer group, there's some very different political views,
Yeah.
but I see you guys maintaining a relationship, which I think is great. And it takes a certain amount of discernment and kinda knowing what to leave on the table and leave off the table and value the relationship more than the other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to value the humanity of the person in front of you most of all.
Well said. Very well said. Very cool. This kinda segues to older generation, younger generation, right? So,
Mhm.
I'm 62, you're, half my age and or less, and we've had a uncle niece relationship, but when you think broadly about my generation and your generation, do you think what do you think about that? Do you think that they understand each other, don't understand each other? What?
I think that I'm a millennial. I'm like the youngest of the millennials. I think you're probably on the youngest end of the boomers.
I am the very end of the boomers, yeah.
Yeah. And I think I was born in 95, so I'm kind of right on the line of the millennials as well.
Yeah,
I think both our generations have fallen prey to a lot of stereotyping
okay.
and a lot of stereotyping and a lot of just like extreme ideas about what that generation does and believes. And so I think it can be very easy for both of our generations to look at the other as the enemy and to sort
Mm,
of believe those stereotypes and believe those exaggerations, to think that they must be what is true without actually considering that generations are, broad swaths of people from
yeah, they are.
different cultures and socioeconomic backgrounds and religions and ethnicities and even like years of life experience. So I think both of our generations have fallen prey that we do it to one another.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of how that played in your life at all, good or bad?
I mean, I think there's sort of the stereotype that I think has died out a bit of the lazy, entitled millennial.
Uh-huh.
And then you also have the stereotype of the totally checked out boomer who didn't really have to work hard for much, but thinks that they did and isn't really aware of what's going on in society nowadays.
Mhm.
And when you have those stereotypes playing out in relationships between people from those two generations, they're just villainizing one another and almost blaming each other for the real problems that they're facing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's easy to do that when it's easy to do that when you don't know a person very well,
Right.
and to jump to conclusions.
Yeah. So you'll have the millennials saying that the boomers ruined the economy for us, and you'll have the boomers saying
Uh,
that the millennials
we
like
we kinda did
didn't
actually.
well, but it's not on a personal level.
Right.
And then you'll have, the boomers feeling as though the millennials just want handouts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there's like a villainizing and an othering of the other group of people
Yeah,
on both sides.
like, for example, you and your husband recently bought a house, right?
We did.
Yeah, and so that's a big hurdle for folks for your peer group these days. because it's outrageously expensive. I mean, I did
Mhm.
how did that how's that working out for you and your peers?
Almost everyone in my generation who's bought a home had help.
What do you mean by help? Like parents helping with the down and stuff like that?
Like parents helping with a down payment, or they lived with their parents for a while to save money, or
Uh,
parents are helping with childcare expenses by watching children, or help pay for college. Some level of that or combination of those factors,
mhm, mhm.
in my experience, is generally at play when someone in my generation has been able to buy a home in their 20s or 30s,
Yeah,
because it's just so unbelievably expensive, and
it
that
is unbelievably expensive.
yeah.
I agree. It's just like the contrast. I mean, my wife and I, let me be clear,
Mhm.
bought our house, the big house that you're familiar with, that we raised the kids in when I was 30. And we put 60K down, which in today's dollars is like 135.
Mhm.
You know, we put 135 down at age 30 and bought the big house. And that's just not typical for your generation right now.
No, it's really not,
You
especially
know,
when my generation, like, not only has housing costs gone up so much, but so have educational costs,
yeah, student debt.
and so right, so a lot of us have student debt, a lot of us are struggling to save for homes because of that, so, I mean, whatever you wanna call help, I do think that
Okay.
the majority of people in my generation who have a sense of financial security, hope about the future, the ability to buy a home, have had some level of support from family.
Mhm, mhm. Now you've because of your apprenticing and becoming a priest in the Anglican Church, you've had plenty of experience working with folks who are significantly older than you, like
Mhm,
your senior rector, I think I got that right,
mhm.
at your church, who I met briefly at your ordination, which was amazing
Yeah, it was.
and a privilege to be there.
Mhm.
You may have a little more experience maybe working professionally with folks who are older than maybe a lot of your peers. What can you say about that? Is it easy or is it present challenges or what?
Yeah, I think when I first came on staff at my church, I was the youngest member of the clergy by a little over a decade. There were other
Wow.
people closer to my age on staff, but they were mostly like your, youth group leaders, that those kinds of jobs that generally tend to attract younger people. But I was the youngest person on staff by a little over 10 or on the clergy team by a little over 10 years.
Okay.
And initially I felt a lot of insecurity about that. I also was pretty freshly postpartum. I came on staff 3 months after my second son was born, so I remember my very first night leading an event at our church, and I had recruited about a dozen volunteers and about 40 people coming, and I looked around the room and realized that I was in charge, and I was the youngest person there,
Here we
and
go.
and it was really intimidating.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really intimidating. That was a little over a year ago, and I've since really felt that was an asset for my ministry.
Mm.
There are not a lot of young clergy in my denomination, especially not young women.
No, there aren't.
Until very recently, I was the youngest ordained person in our diocese. I'm not anymore. That at first made me feel really insecure, and I was very aware of my inexperience, and I still am. I'm still very aware of how inexperienced I am, but I do think that my youth and my unique position as both a priest and a young mom has given me a perspective and an ability to relate to people a little bit differently than my peers, which I think is helpful.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's much more heavily male and a little bit older traditionally
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
almost all churches and the
Yeah.
Anglican Church. So yeah,
Mhm.
you're bringing something really different, which yeah, I agree. It could be a huge asset, both just peer to peer level, but also even folks a little older than you. It's like, hey, I'm a young mother. This is what we're dealing with, you know, as opposed to a 40-year-old, priest who's a father, but,
Right.
not the perspective of a young mother. I think you and my oldest son's wife bear a lot of similarities. You both, like, moved cross country, did all kinds of stuff, and we produced humans along the way. It's 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 just it's just impressive. I'm impressed, you know?
Thank you.
Yeah,
I do
so
think I do think it was really healing for me. Without revealing too much, it was really healing for me as someone coming into ministry from a tradition that wasn't as celebratory of women in ministry, to come in as a mother and see that
Mhm.
be viewed not as a downside, but as an upside to
Oh,
who I was and what I could do.
okay.
I was told early in my ordination process that it was so exciting to have a young mom going through the process, that it hadn't happened before, and that they were excited about it, and that was really encouraging for me. I think sometimes our differences and our particularity can feel as though they're hindrances, but they don't have to be. They can be ways that we can have unique perspectives and unique ways to care for each other.
Hmm, interesting. Well said. Well, I think we've covered the waterfront here. I really appreciate your perspectives. I think that the sense of your intellectual curiosity about people and your heart of care as a pastor is a really interesting combination.
Hmm.
And I think it's going to serve you well. And if folks listen to the first episode, they I was an elder, a lay leader basically in
Mhm.
my church for 20 years. And it does put you up against people at their best days and at
Mhm.
their worst times. And
Yeah.
it's a privilege to be there for them in those times. And
Yeah.
you'll have a career of doing that, and I think you'll do a great job.
Thank
So
you. Thank you.
let's wrap this up with a lightning round. You ready?
We'll see.
Okay. Favorite band?
Ah, I don't know that I have one. There's a Christian music collective I love called the Porter's Gate. I am not a big music person, which
Okay.
is a
All
little a
right.
little embarrassing to say, but that is
Favorite
my rapid fire answer.
favorite thing to read that's not professional?
I love speculative fiction,
Spec-
whether that's
what is that?
yeah, it's like the broad category of fantasy or science fiction or like apocalyptic fiction. Anything that's like it's our world with some kind of what if question to
So
it.
did you like the Hunger Games? Did you read it in print?
I did in probably middle school, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was written for middle schoolers originally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Favorite quality of your dad?
Mm. He is incredibly self-sacrificial.
Hmm.
He will do anything for his family, and he will do it quietly without drawing attention to himself.
Okay. Goofiest thing one of your kids ever said to you?
Oh, man. The other day, I was talking to my oldest about marriage, and I asked him if he wanted to get married when he grew up, and he said he wanted to marry my husband.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How old is he?
He's 3, and I told him he
Okay.
couldn't marry my husband because I already did, and then he said he wanted to marry his brother.
Okay. Well, there's years to work these things out.
Yep, we got some time.
Okay. And if money and time were no object, where would you spend 3 days?
3 days?
Any amount of money anywhere in the world.
I've always wanted to see the pyramids.
Really?
I have. My husband and I are coming up on our 10-year anniversary next year, and we're kind of
Okay.
kicking around ideas, and I really
Pyramids are
wanna go to
cool. I've seen
Egypt.
them. They're pretty cool.
Really? I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Back when I
I
was in
would
the
love to
Navy.
see
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty awe inspiring. Okay. There you have it. Lightning round. Well, Addie, thank you so much for spending some time with the Ivy League trucker. I think
Mhm.
that you give a lot of great insights to your generation and also to someone who's dedicated her life to serving others. So, yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you, I really appreciated getting to chat with you.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
I really don't have an assignment out of this one, as I've suggested in prior episodes. Maybe my only suggestion is be like Addie. And don't forget to follow the show so you get us in your regular podcast feed. And please share this with your friends and family and folks you think might be interested, because we're trying to grow that community of folks who just want to connect. Until next time, it's Clint, the Ivy League Trucker.